Chapter 14:11, Rise. I'll be going, my sisters. Leroy declared as she charged forward, gaining momentum and preparing for her grand leap of destiny. The immortals turned to watch, lumps in their throats and metaphorical tears in their eyes as they saw the first and most dedicated immortal initiate her final fight. What a glorious sight, what a noble sacrifice. This was how it was always meant to be, here in the depths of the dungeon, with the colony in danger of being overwhelmed. This was how an immortal was supposed to live, this was how they were supposed to end. As one, the armored sisters bowed low, touching their mandibles to the diamond platform. Seek no more, sister, they called, gladness in their hearts. The rest of the militia watched the display, confused and not a little disturbed, as the platform was, in fact, not in any real danger of being overwhelmed, but they could sure use the help of the immortals if they were willing to get up and fight. Instead, they watched as Leroy gathered her strength and launched herself into battle, sailing through the air to crash straight into the monster's chest. Immediately, she was overwhelmed by a wave of toxins so dense she couldn't see through it, only to be showered in thick, acidic slime the moment she made contact. Even so, with the force of her charge behind it, the impact was shattering, sending the monster reeling as she latched on with her mandibles, biting deep into its slug flesh. The monster screeched and lifted its arms, trying to slam Leroy, knock her loose and send her flying into the bottomless abyss around the platform. A futile effort. Leroy endured the blows with joy, watching her HP tick down as the gas and acid wore into her defenses more and more. She latched onto the monster with her legs, furiously biting as the slug began to tip forward, brought down by her sheer weight. Damn it, Leroy cried as her legs touched the ground again. Give me some more. Her HP wasn't falling fast enough. At this rate, the others might bring the monster down before she was able to gloriously sacrifice herself. She pulled her head away, tearing a massive chunk of slug flesh away and causing the creature to bellow in rage. Seeing a chance, she leapt once more, throwing herself into its maw. Bite me, damn it, she raged, using her mandibles to savage the beast from the inside. They dared, just for a moment, to believe. And yet, something was off, as the massive body of the Tier 7 soldier was dragged clear. From the dents in her carapace, something was beginning to emerge. Thin tendrils rose straight up, climbing higher and higher until they were meters tall. The healers demanded all stand back, fearing that some 5th stratum infestation had taken root within the soldier. Still, Leroy didn't move. At the tips of the long stalks, a fruiting bud blossomed, a ball of fungal growth that began to glow. In that moment, the air around the platform became suffused with soft light, revealing the entire space had been filled with spores, and more blooming from the monsters Leroy had defeated every second. The drifting spots of light moved toward her, gathering into the tips of the stalks and filling it with light that began to travel down the stalk and suffuse the body of the fallen immortal. Her legs began to twitch. Her antennae began to rise. The immortals began to lose hope. Unfeeling, as if in a dream, Leroy rose from the ground, her broken body slowly stitching itself together, and she went to force herself back into the fight. She did not feel. She did not think. She felt as if her entire being had detached from her body and now filled the whole platform. She had fallen, yet still, she had to fight. Truly, she was cursed. Chapter 14:12. Never. Ending stupidity. You really are a moron. Eldest, please, don't you think I feel bad enough already? About what? Living. Tell me you're upset that you survived, I dare you. Leroy, wisely for once, kept her scent to herself. I'm tempted to thwack her anyway. Evolving in secret, trying to sneak yourself into a fight you couldn't survive, giving the healers an absolute conniption, not to mention the resources you could have wasted. I don't like to call my siblings selfish, Leroy, but holy moly, you make it difficult. I'm not selfish, she protests. I just want to give my all to the colony. Is it so wrong to want to devote your entire self to your family? Leroy, we are far better served by your life than your death, I say, exasperated. You do so much for the family, you're brave and strong, you and your followers fight so hard. All of that goes away if you go the great big colony in the sky. Leroy looks confused for a moment. There's another colony out there. We have to destroy them. I will gloriously sacrifice myself to ensure that we triumph as the superior ants. That's not what I meant. I sigh. This ant is beyond redemption. No matter how many times I try to set her straight, she can't help but hold fast to her self-destructive philosophy. Somehow, in the process, she managed to turn the others who share her point of view into useful and productive members of the colony. It's a miracle, really. Leroy now lies flat on the ground while numerous healers pick over her carapace, laughing to the point of losing their grip and falling off. All traces of the fungal growth are gone now, but I'm told it was quite the spectacular sight when it was in full bloom. Well, not like I need to see it in order to know what it is, that's what core surgery is for. Eternal zombie fungus. A powerful variant of cordyceps fungus, this semi-sentient growth will use its host to spread vitality-draining spores to their enemies. Upon reaching critically low health, the fungus will activate, taking control of the body and drawing in what it has spread to heal the host. What makes this even more absurd is I'm pretty sure the spores from one fungal host will work plenty well on another, since it's the same species of fungus and the same species of host. Which means when more and more immortals reach tier 7, they'll be spreading the spores all over the place like crazy, making themselves even more unkillable. I have no idea how you did it, Leroy, but you managed to make yourself even more unkillable. Unlike the Phoenix Flame organ, which had a clearly defined weakness, the time it took to refill after being used, this fungus will just keep the ants going forever. They can't even fall unconscious, the fungus will just take over and keep them fighting, and as long as they are inflicting damage, they're spreading more spores, which will lead to more healing. Just thinking of how many spores they would spread on a frontal charge makes my head hurt. They'd be able to stick in the fight for hours. In fact, they would be forced to stick in the fight. You're going to force the other immortals to choose this evolution, aren't you, eldest? Obviously, this evolution kicks thorax. Not a word from you about it either. You've done enough damage already. Leroy just sighs. I can see she's feeling pretty emotionally defeated, but at this point, I have no idea what to do about it. Still, I don't sympathize, this moron deserves to suffer if it means she has to stick around and help the family. Suffer forever, fool. Well, now that I'm back, you can go and rest, along with the rest of the immortals, I tell her. I'm sure the others will have a lot of questions about your new form, and Smithant will probably have a few things to say. Alright, eldest, there's no fight left in this ant. Her glorious moment was snatched away, again. I'm sure it's temporary, nothing keeps these fools down for long. Leroy and the rest of the immortals will go back to scheming and fighting soon enough, I've no doubt. Here they come now, filing past in depressed, ordered ranks, each one with a healer on their back, checking them for injuries and whispering mockery into their antennae. You'll live forever, look at you, not a scratch. Not now, not ever. I'm so impressed, one says, pretending sincerity. You're dedicated to eternal service to the colony. Eternal, eternal. I heard you the first time, the poor immortal complains. Eternal, the healer whispers, trailing off as she continues to check for injuries. Shaking my head, I turn away from the sorry sight and head back to the defeated-looking ant in front of me. You know what, Leroy, you pretty much were dead out there, right? She shifts, looking at me reproachfully. Obviously not, she mutters, I'm right here, aren't I? You are, but read through your species again. You pretty much died, and then the fungus took over and put you back together. That wasn't you fighting there at the end, was it? Well, no, I suppose not, she says, a little reluctantly. If you ask me, you were dead, I tell her, dead as an ant-shaped doornail. The fungus zombified you and brought you back to life. So, in a way what, she says, showing signs of life. In a way, doesn't this evolution give you the opportunity to die for the colony, many times? You can give up your life for the colony in a glorious charge, then the fungus puts you back together so you can do it again. It's not like you choose to come back, that's outside of your power, but you do choose to gloriously fight and die. It isn't the same. She protests, but I can tell she's thinking about it. A seed of thought has been planted in that thick head of hers. Hopefully it will take root. I'll leave you be, take it easy for a little while, Leroy. I'll see you later, and back out to the platform I go. As ever, it's complete mayhem out here, and it's only getting worse as the wave intensifies. Well, nothing else for it, back into the thick of it. My brains whip into gear as I start to draw deep on my gravitational mana, spinning it together and preparing to unleash a gravity well. While I'm at it, I start putting together a gravity mana construct. I'm going to be absolutely pumping out the gravity spells this time around. I need to get used to using my new magic, after all. We'll see how the 5th likes getting blasted in the face with a singularity or 5. I'm going to give the wave absolute heck until they force me to go back and sleep again. The Templars are already out here, waiting for me as I step to the center of the platform. Feeling rested, eldest? Amelia asks me. I poke her with an antenna. Time for fighting. Chapter 14:13. The Flow. Advent, loyal soldier of the colony and member of the council, stood alongside her sibling, the General Sloane, and watched. It doesn't quite hit home until you see it for yourself, she noted. I've been here for 3 days, and I still can't quite believe it, Sloane replied. Getting the reports is overwhelming enough, but this is beyond my imagination. The two stood, clinging to a wall as they looked down over the connection between the fourth stratum and the fifth. Deep below the mountain that the colony had turned into their nest, the transformation that had taken place here was nothing short of baffling. Where once there had been monster-infested tunnels turned into staging grounds for the invasion, now there lay a hub of industry without rival anywhere else in the colony's lands. A new portal network had been established, the extravagant cost deemed justified in order to save the time it took to shift materials from the mountain above to below, and from those portals, an unending stream of all that the ants created poured out. Reinforcements, healers, medicines, new trainees for the militia, metals, wood, precious stone, ores, cores, biomass, everything. It had proven to take too much time to carry objects through the portal, so the carvers had laid down tracks and devised carts that could bridge the gap caused by the width of the portal itself, just so they could move things through that little bit faster. The two council members watched as the fully laden carts streamed through the magic gateways, being sorted and shifted to different paths that would take them to specific warehouses to be unloaded. Already, the surrounding tunnels were stuffed with storage, the defensive line pushed further and further out to accommodate the necessary space. Peeling the dungeon veins from this vast chamber alone had been a mighty work. Not too long ago, it would have been beyond the colony's skill entirely. And all of this, everything that came through, everything that was processed, all the materials, all the ants, all the humans and Golgari and various other races, all vanished down the shaft into the fifth stratum. Solent has somehow managed to leverage the production of almost the entire colony, Sloane noted. We are sending down 10,000 ants a day, and still she wants more. Are our casualties that high? Advent fretted. We shouldn't be throwing away the lives of our siblings. You've seen the reports, the casualties are far lower than what we might have expected going into this, but the injury rate is staggering, and the time to heal wounds sustained down there is much longer than the norm. Every healer we can spare across the entire colony is down there already, and it isn't enough. Look over there. The general used her antennae to direct Advent's attention, and she saw a new facility being constructed, an enormous, 10-floored building being built into the vast chamber wall. New hospital, the first of 6. 6. That's right. They're running out of space down in the fortress to accommodate the wounded. Attrition during the wave has proven to be absurdly high. Did you see what the average deployment time for a soldier on the platforms is? 2 hours, Advent said grimly. 2 hours in the fight, then a week out of it recovering, Sloane confirmed. Generals are better, but still awful. Scouts and mages last the longest, but the fighting is so hectic that even they can't avoid injury. The two turned their attention back to the shaft. In their minds, it had transformed from just an elevator, or a tunnel, into something far more terrifying. It was a mouth, and it was eating everything the colony could put into it. The fortress is an insatiable beast, Sloane sighed. We're putting in everything that we can produce, and the appetite never gets any lower. All the profits from our trade with the Brathian conglomerate are being eaten up by this monster. I thought we were using those cores to graduate more hatchlings. Advent asked. And where are they going? Sloane snapped, pointing back at the hole in the ground. It's not like we can stop it now either. If we pull back, the fortress will be chewed up and toxified in a matter of days. Nothing will be recoverable, all of it lost. What are you worried about? Just come out and say it directly. Sloane fell silent for a moment, rubbing at her temples with her antennae, a gesture many of them had picked up from the eldest. Advent knew what was troubling her. Sister, they all shared the same concerns, but it was better for such things to be out in the open. Solent tricked us from the beginning, Sloane said. She knew all along just what this project was going to take. The stepped expansion of this staging ground is proof enough by itself. If we'd known from the beginning what this was going to require, we would have never gone along with it. There are so many things we need to focus on. Our position in the fourth is still unstable. Shoring up our borders in the third. Training our siblings, raising their skills and increasing the number of Tier 6 ants across the colony. The eldest themselves demanded we slow down to focus on such things. Yet it was the eldest's idea to invade the fifth, Advent stated. This isn't Solent's doing, she's just following orders. I know that, the general groused. I'm not criticizing her, she just did what she thought was necessary to complete the task put in front of her. What I'm worried about is the stakes. If this invasion fails, we will never get back the resources we've invested in getting this far. It will be a blow to the colony like we haven't experienced before. It will be a blow to the eldest, Advent said quietly. Some might doubt their decision-making, call into question their judgment. The eldest has never led us astray before, Sloane fretted. We just have to trust that this time won't be any different. As they discussed, the ceaseless flow of precious resources did not pause even for an instant. All of it vanishing down into the darkness, food for the beast. Chapter 14:14, The Curse of Inaction. Morelia felt like she was going crazy, and it wasn't just because of her current company. Is everything all right? Isaac asked, stroking his mustache with one hand as he tried to execute a graceful lean on the wall beside her. She could only roll her eyes at the display. No matter how she tried to communicate that this sort of behavior made her uncomfortable, Isaac didn't seem to be capable of receiving the message. It wasn't as if he was being deliberately annoying, or trying to get on her nerves, she genuinely thought he was just stupid. Which didn't make him any less irritating. I'm bored, she stated. Oh, Isaac blinked. He stared, then blinked again, then panicked. He'd finally gotten Morelia to go somewhere with him, and now she was bored. This was a disaster. All of his meticulous planning. Mustache preparation alone had taken 5 precious hours, time that could only be spared by cutting back on sleep. Severely sleep-deprived he may be, but he looked fine, if he did say so himself. Of course, this is just the mess, our next stop will be much more entertaining. All he had to do now was think about another possible destination, quick. She'd agreed to have a meal with him, so of course they were in the mess hall allocated to the militia, because where else were they going to eat in the fortress? Having said that, the food was quite good. Isaac hurriedly took his seat and began to divide up the cake he'd ordered for them. Someone had told the ants how to make cheesecake, and now they were experimenting. This particular offering was a triple-layered chocolate cheesecake with a particularly thick, crumbly chewy base he just couldn't get enough of. He passed Morelia her slice, smiling with what he hoped was just the right amount of masculine bravado mixed with gentlemanly debonair. In the legionary's eyes, he looked incontinent. Thank you, she said, and took a bite, eyes widening at the burst of flavor. Why the heck were the ants so good at baking? It didn't make any sense. Well, they did have quite the sweet tooth. Not that they had teeth, but this was excessive. I didn't mean bored about being here, she clarified. I'm bored because we haven't been allowed to do any fighting. The colony has kept us wrapped up in wool since the wave started. Every day is drills and gear maintenance from morning till night, all the while everyone else in the fortress has been fighting monsters. You've been out there too, haven't you, Isaac? He was relieved to hear she wasn't bored with his company, so relieved he felt weak at the knees, and yet. I've been out there, he said quietly, the flavor of the cake turning to ash in his mouth. He grimaced and put down his fork. It's rough. I've been in the 5th before, she told him, I know what it's like. This was the reason he felt so attracted to her. Objectively speaking, Morelia's features may not have been the most appealing. There was a scar here, a blemish there. She was too square-jawed, her features set in a near-perpetual scowl. And yet, her dark eyes burned with a courage that seemed truly bottomless. Was there anything in all of Pangara that could make her take a step back? Isaac didn't think so. He couldn't look into those eyes and not want to be near a fire that fierce, to try and enjoy a fraction of its heat. He'd been deployed to the platforms twice so far, and he'd be going again soon, once Cavalant had her legs back. Even the 3rd during the height of the wave, with the endless frenzy of demons, the sky thick with smoke and ash, the temperature so hot the sweat evaporated from his skin the moment it formed, didn't come close to the nightmare of the 5th. Isaac had never believed there was an afterlife, but if hell truly did exist for those who strayed from the path, then it would look like the 5th during a wave. He nodded to himself. I'll tell you what, he said, once we finish eating here, I'll see if I can pull a few strings and get you onto a platform, just for a bit. With a little luck, you might get to talk to Anthony, make your case. A stupid idea. He was trying to court this woman, why was he offering her a glimpse of a toxic hellscape? Morelia's eyes brightened. That'd be fantastic. Thank you. It was worth taking Isaac up on his offer. She felt bad for resorting to this, but Commander Chiron was being stubborn, refusing to say anything regarding their deployment. Desperate times had called for desperate measures. It was almost insultingly easy for Isaac to bring her to Anthony's platform. There were many checks and barriers on the way, not to mention several large, imposing gates, each emblazoned with the likeness of the eldest, but they were waved through most of them with barely a glance. Was Isaac that highly ranked? He could just swan around the fortress with a legionary and nobody cared, even if they walked right up to Anthony himself. Stepping through the final gate, Morelia was confronted with the full scale of what the colony was up against. The battle on the platform was nightmarish. Slime and mucus dripped from every surface tainted by the toxic mana, oozing together to form a slow-moving ocean of corruption that fell all around the platform itself. BG Container 10448 ed3 ed0 Display. Flex Direction. Column, Align Items. Center, Justify Content. Center, Z Index. 2,147,483,647. Important, BGSSP 10448 Margin Left. Auto, Margin Right. Auto, Display. Flex, Justify Content. Center, BG Container 10448 F61 E68 Display. Flex Direction. Column, Align Items. Center, Justify Content. Center, Z Index. 2,147,483,647. Important. The slime was bad enough, but that ocean was teeming with monsters. Screams, cries, roars and bellows filled the air as the ants and their sapient allies held the line against seemingly impossible odds. In the center of it all, a giant ant stood defiant. The moment she stepped through the gate, Morelia felt a giant mind latch onto hers. "Where the heck have you been?" Anthony demanded. "Get down here." Chapter 14-15. The Tanks. Brilliant was a busy ant, which was largely how she liked it. After her success with the portals, the eldest had dumped a number of projects into her mandibles, including the investigation of the Church of the Path. All in all, it had kept her hopping around the colony, solving mysteries and investigating unknowns. That was the sort of thing she enjoyed. What she didn't like was fussing about with carvers on engineering. Everything seems to be working as intended, Tungsten said. Brilliant turned to the left, then to the right, then threw her front legs up in frustration. "Then why am I here?" she declared. "I was busy plumbing the mysteries of this world in my lab, and you dragged me down here to say everything is working perfectly. Why? Tell me why. I have to know." To her, this was such a waste of time it qualified as a mystery all on its own. Surely, no ant could possibly justify such a waste of time and resources. What was the motivation behind it? What could it possibly be? "If you let me finish," Tungsten huffed, "I was going to say that everything is working perfectly, so far. However, as the concentration of mana builds up in the tanks, we are starting to detect resonance between them. You asked us to call you if that happened." Brilliant lowered her front legs and clasped them together in front of her mandibles. "Of course I did," she said quietly, "because I'm brilliant. I knew this would happen." She rushed deeper into the wide chamber right in the heart of the fortress and began poking at the tanks, using her antennae to prod at the highly sensitive, heavily enchanted equipment. The chamber was circular and enormous, the outer ring filled with row after row of tanks, each containing just a trickle of a brightly glowing fluid, liquid mana. "I thought we might have gathered more by this point," Brilliant noted, pressing her face against the glass tanks to examine the contents. "There are a few reasons for that," Tungsten noted, trying to keep up with the mage. "We only recently amassed enough woofers to operate all of the cleansing stations. The fortress is still only operating at 70% of its designed capacity. In addition, it's taking more cleansed mana than expected to maintain the fortress against the natural energy of the fifth. The mana outside is highly concentrated, and we have to hold the walls at all costs." "Of course you do," Brilliant scoffed, then continued to poke and prod at each of the tanks. "If the fortress becomes contaminated, it's over for all of us." Tungsten sighed. She wasn't wrong. Once the fortress became contaminated, that would be the chink in their carapace that the Krath would exploit. They might be laying low for the time being, but the colony hadn't forgotten that the slugs were out there, scheming and working to bring down the fortress. They couldn't afford to show weakness. "This is bad," Brilliant noted after apparently finishing her inspection. "Bad how?" Tungsten demanded. "I need specifics if we're going to fix it." "I don't know yet," Brilliant declared happily. "These tanks aren't even 5% full, and yet, despite all the measures we took, they are still resonating with each other. I can't even begin to describe just how much mana will be contained in this chamber when they're all full, and the resonance effect is exponential, not linear. In short, things are going to get crazy in here if these fill up." "Crazy how?" Tungstand demanded, exasperated. You want me to predict something that has never happened before? An explosion, a tear in the fabric of reality. Delicious cake raining from the sky, the entire fortress being torn out of existence. I don't know. She didn't sound particularly upset by any of these prospects, either. Look, there's no need to worry, she said. How am I supposed to not worry? Tungstand demanded. You just told me this chamber could destroy the entire fortress. Why wouldn't I worry? Because I'm brilliant, the mage declared, clacking her mandibles together for emphasis. I'll figure out the problem and come up with a potential solution for you to implement. It's going to be fine. It turned out to be an interesting puzzle here after all. They'd designed measures specifically for reducing the resonance between the tanks, going to great lengths to suppress energy vibrations, and yet, it was still happening. With a chamber this size, and all the mana it could contain, it would be the greatest concentration of energy the colony had ever produced by 1,000 times. The potential for explosive consequences was tantalizing. BG container 10,448,869 E4D display. Flex direction. Column, align items. Center, justify content. Center, Z index. 2,147,483,647. Important, BGSSP 10,448 margin left. Auto, margin right. Auto, display. Flex, justify content. Center, BG container 10,448 F61 E68 display. Flex direction. Column, align items. Center, justify content. Center, Z index. 2,147,483,647. Important, and the stakes were high. Solent's entire strategy was built around the accumulation of power in this chamber. If it didn't work, they were going to be in trouble. Brilliant clacked her mandibles happily. I might have to bring some members of my team down here, she told Tungstand. This could prove to be quite difficult. I'll prepare a separate chamber for you to work in, the carver said. I know your experiments can be temperamental. Chapter 14:16. The Legion deploys. Commander Chiron was not enjoying her time. The Legion had tasked her with destroying a potential ancient, a monster subject to the call, and she had pursued it to the best of her ability. Only now she found herself locked in a fortress surrounded by millions of monsters during a wave. Not only could she not attack the target she had been given without ensuring the death of her entire legion, the blasted creature was growing stronger by the day. Every inspection of the blasted monster's core showed it was gaining blasted levels at a steady blasted pace, fighting against the boundless horrors of the fifth. Meanwhile, her own people were sitting on their hands doing drills. In truth, Chiron had long ago given up on achieving her mission. Without some catastrophic blunder on the part of the ants, the odds of successfully attacking the beast were abysmal. No, she would do her duty and shadow the monster all the way to the sixth, at which point it would become someone else's problem. Still, it was frustrating. Chiron and her legion were more than enough to destroy a Tier 7 mythic monster under normal circumstances, but this one happened to be surrounded by tens of thousands of other monsters at any given moment. The general is available to speak to you now, a voice rang out in the commander's head, and she pushed off the wall, scowling. Solent was busy, of course she was, but Chiron couldn't help but feel irritated. It wasn't the ant's fault, but her general foul mood was making every minor hindrance stoke her temper. Chiron caught herself as she was walking through the door, wondering what she was thinking. Since when did she care if anything was the blasted ant's fault or not? What these monsters thought of her was no concern of Chiron's. Inside the chamber, she found the ant general seated on one of the strange ant chairs, munching away on something. The commander expected it to be a cake slice or some other delicacy, washed down with a refreshing cup of tea. The ants did like their sweets and tea, after all. To her displeasure, she realized Solent was chewing on biomass, mincing the material with her mandibles before bringing her head over the food to get a mouthful. Reminding me what you are. As if I would ever forget. Nothing the general did was ever an accident or coincidence. She wanted Chiron to see her like this, behaving as a monster should. In short order, their minds were connected, and the commander wasted no time. I want my people in the fight. What are your conditions? We don't need you in the fight, Solent replied coldly. Your information has proven to be useful, but we are quite capable of defending the fortress on our own. I didn't say you weren't able to. I said I want my people in the fight. The general munched another mouthful, her large, many-faceted eyes focused on her guest. What was it like, to view the world that way, the legionary wondered. Not just to see the world broken into 1,000 shards, one for each lens, but as a monster, where almost everything on Pangara was just food to make you stronger. One day, the colony would turn on their allies, driven by hunger and a will so much greater than their own. Chiron was as certain of it as she was her own name. Are your people prepared to fight alongside monsters? Alongside those who are loyal to the colony? Solent asked. I doubt your single legion would be able to hold a platform on your own. Chiron bared her teeth. Want to bet? The men and women in her legion were as tough as abyssal steel and twice as deadly. The fifth held no fear for her. Really? You are willing to hold a platform by yourselves? For how long? Indefinitely, Chiron stated without hesitation. We don't need to be relieved. With only 5,000 combatants. How will you rotate out your fatigued soldiers? I'm sure you're aware that the onslaught never stops out there. Solent didn't sound doubtful, only coolly polite as she continued her meal. Chiron narrowed her eyes. We are the Deep Legion, she stated simply. Solent waited for more words from the woman, but when none came, she simply nodded. It was time to measure the worth of this legion. They would be her opponent in the future, of that she was sure. She should learn what she could while she had the chance. Preparation was 9/10 of victory, after all. We will provide medical support, along with a battalion of reserves. This is non-negotiable, she said, cutting off the commander before she could speak. Should a single platform fall, the entire fortress will be compromised. How many in a battalion? 10,000. Ants and support militia. Will that be a problem? Chiron chewed on it for a moment. No, she declared finally. As long as they follow orders. I can guarantee that. Then we have a deal. Where do you want me to deploy and when? Now, Solent said. She made no gesture, but another ant stepped into the room in that moment, a folder gripped neatly in its mandibles. BG Container 10,448,869 E4D Display. Flex Direction. Column, Align Items. Center, Justify Content. Center, Z Index. 2,147,483,647. Important, BGSSP 10,448 Margin left. Auto, margin right. Auto, display. Flex, justify content. Center, BG Container 10,448 F61E68 display. Flex direction. Column, align items. Center, justify content. Center, Z index, 2,147,483,647. Important, here are the details of your deployment. Your legion will need to shift their billets to the chambers indicated in the documents. You have 12 hours to prepare yourselves before the troops on that platform rotate off. I look forward to seeing what you can do. As if Chiron didn't realize what the ant was doing. Enjoy the show, was all she said before turning on her heel and striding from the room. Mana burned in her veins. She needed a good fight. 1417 The Legion takes the stage. Where the heck have you been, Morelia? Anthony demanded when there was finally a small break in the fighting. The effects of the berserker rage still lingered in the form of a trembling in her limbs, but she welcomed the momentary weakness that came with the fading rage. Her mind was once again wholly her own, and Morelia grinned up at the giant ant. I've been sitting on my hands doing drills and cleaning gear. Seems like a bit of a waste, he mentally snorted. Didn't you know there was a wave going on? Tell that to Solent, she's the one who didn't want us to go and fight. What sort of waste is that? Hang on a second, he clacks his gigantic, horse-sized mandibles a few times. Yep, you guys are getting deployed. I figured something had to be up, no way she would waste resources. Morelia stared blankly for a moment, slipping her twin blades back into their sheaths. What do you mean, we're getting deployed now? Yep, right now. All I had to do was put in a good word. Solent is always happy to take my suggestions, she's a smart little hatchling, just needs a bit of guidance every now and again. Somehow, she didn't think that the relationship was quite as Anthony was imagining it. Nevertheless, she couldn't sit around if her troops were going into battle. I'd better get back there, she said, preparing to turn and run back to the fortress. Can you tell Isaac thanks for me? I didn't get a chance to tell him myself before jumping into the fight. I'll tell him, he's over there somewhere with the militia. She followed his pointed antenna for a moment and saw that Isaac was indeed out there, commanding the human militia in the thick of the battle, roaring and wielding his spear with skill and grace. I always thought he was a bit of a coward, she told Anthony. Looks like I was wrong. A coward, Isaac, He's too dumb to be a coward. Now get going. Tell your commander she smells. I won't. Spoilsport. With barely a chance to wipe the acid off her armor, Morelia was off. When she arrived back at the Legion camp, sweating from the exertion, she found the place in an uproar. In the midst of the ordered chaos, Commander Chiron stood, glaring at her with the heat of a deep lava elemental. Nice of you to join us, Tribune, the old woman grated. I hope you enjoyed your leave. It's the last you're going to get for quite some time. Yes, Commander. Of course, Commander. Morelia snapped out a quick salute for good measure, though she doubted it would help soothe Chiron's temper. Still breathing heavily after her run, Morelia threw herself into the camp, hunting down her officers and trying to get a handle on the situation. Joshin, despite being furiously busy himself, couldn't help but take a moment to mock her. You chose an interesting moment to have a meal with your gentleman friend. I was fighting on a platform alongside the target an hour ago. What have you achieved today? She shot back, not pissing off the commander, he replied with a sly smile. As much as she would have liked to argue about that, he wasn't wrong. Still, Morelia didn't consider her time wasted, and with her well-drilled and practiced officers and soldiers, she was able to get everything moving as it should in relatively short order. Which was good. It wasn't long until the Legion was marching through the fortress, their banners held high and supply wagons creaking along behind them. In a display of typical ant efficiency, the colony had already blocked off a wide section of tunnel to allow the Legion smooth transit through the network. Well, they blocked off the ground level, the upper levels were still filled with ants. It was a strange and surreal moment for Morelia. She was proud to be marching along with her Legion, but in the heart of the ant fortress, it felt strange to feel so defensive. Her fellow soldiers moved as if they expected a surprise attack at any moment, watching every ant overhead with a cynical eye. For their part, the ants didn't pay much mind to the marching legionaries below. They had places to go and things to do, there wasn't time to stand about gawking. When they arrived at their destination, things didn't slow down. The troops needed to be billeted in their new chambers, and it was immediately suspicious just how well prepared the accommodations were. If Anthony had only managed to persuade Solon to allow them to deploy a few hours ago, then why were there thousands of rooms and beds prepared so close to the platform? As she'd suspected, the eldest hadn't been the one to deploy the Legion here, it had clearly been planned for a long time. She pointed this out to Chiron, who only nodded before ordering her back to her duties. After another half-hour of ensuring the gear was properly stowed and all the 1,000 small logistical tasks were properly dealt with, she was summoned back to the command tent to find all the officers in attendance. She shot Joshin a questioning glance, but he merely shrugged. Chiron, of course, picked up on the gesture. I'll tell you why you're here, Tribune, since you're the last to arrive, she said. Apologies, Commander, Morelia said, crashing her fist to her chest in a swift salute. I was seeing to our arrangements in the barracks. We have a brief tactical meeting with the Ant General in charge of this platform, along with the General in charge of our support militia. They should be here shortly. The officers settled in around the table to discuss their upcoming assignment and possible formations to use on the platform. It was clear that they were hungering for the challenge, a chance to fight back against the dungeon. They hadn't braved the baptism and risked their lives to sit on their hands. The Legion wanted to fight. After some time had passed, an Ant General scuttled in with a mage interpreter, escorted by legionaries on their flanks. After some negotiation, it was arranged for a Legion mage to act as a relay, passing their words on to the officers, and the mental connections were made. Despite your deployment, I'm still the Ant in charge of overseeing this platform, the General told them. I don't have any interest in messing with your tactics or telling you how to do your jobs, just like you have no interest in taking orders from a monster. I only have one demand. If you need help, ask for it. If I think you need help, but haven't asked for it, I'll provide it anyway. Can you live with that? The Ant General was the no-nonsense type, and Morelia could see that Chiron appreciated the direct language, even if she didn't like having to listen to a monster. They discussed other matters regarding the platform until the General saw herself out, satisfied they had come to an understanding. At that point, the General in charge of the reserve militia arrived. It wasn't always easy to tell one ant apart from another, particularly when they belonged to the same caste. However, Morelia was fairly certain she recognized this one. Solent, looking forward to working with you, the little general stated. Chapter 14:18. Strongest under the earth. Who are we? Chiron bellowed. The Legio Nem Abbaci. The soldiers roared back. Who are we? She demanded again, her voice effortlessly rising above the thunderous march of armored feet on stone. The shield against the darkness. Who are we? The sword of civilization. Who are we? The Legionem Abbaci. What do you fear? Nothing. To whom do you bow? No one. For how long will you fight? The commander roared, her voice crashing like thunder. Forevermore. WHO are we? The 52nd Legion. The 52nd Legion. The 52nd Legion. With every cry, the soldiers holding the banners lifted them proudly into the air, while the regular troops crashed their fists into their chest plates, causing the deep ring of abyssal steel to shake the walls. The ants had opened the gate wide enough for the Legion to march through in a column 10 wide, and even as she exhorted her soldiers and set their blood to pumping, she was running her experienced eye over the platform the moment she stepped through. It wasn't the first time she'd seen the fifth during a wave, but even so, this was something different. The intensity of the mana was absurdly high, and they hadn't even reached the halfway mark of the wave. Above and below, the outer wall of the fortress formed a sheer barrier, rising into the darkness overhead and disappearing into the void below. The sheer emptiness of that gap between the fortress and the rest of the fifth was mind-bending to look at, but she didn't pay it much mind. No, what caught her eye was the platform itself. As the Legion marched through the gate and over the bridge, their feet slamming down in perfect unison, she studied every aspect of the platform. Running through the channels beneath, an awesome amount of mana hummed, racing like a raging torrent through the conduits and into the fortress itself. All around the platform, the ants were already engaged in heavy fighting, alongside their militia. The fighting was brutal. On the front lines, ants were deluged with acid, slime and mucus as they fought with their mandibles, ripping and tearing into the endless tide of monsters that threatened to smash through their lines at any moment. It was easy to see what the main strategy was. They wanted to use their most powerful weapon, the cleansed mana, to its greatest effect, dragging the monsters into the blue zone and allowing it to break the corrupted creatures of the fifth apart. An obvious downside was that this allowed the enemy to get much too close. The monsters of the fifth were all too happy to be dragged forward, allowing them to discharge mucus, parasites and filth all over the platform. The support were doing their best, launching powerful barrages of acid and complex artillery spells into the oncoming horde, but it was never enough to hold back the tide. Chiron rolled her shoulders and felt the old bones in her neck crack and pop. It had been too long since she'd had the chance to really attack the filth of the fifth. This would be a good day. She turned her back on the chaos and watched as her soldiers marched into formation, pretty as a parade ground. Their armor and weapons gleamed. The banners of the 52nd were spotless, proudly displaying the Iron Mountain and crossed swords that had been the symbol of this legion for over 2,000 years. Her officers formed up around her as the last of the troops came through the gate. Once they had taken their places and relieved the ants from their positions, those gates would slam shut, cutting them off from the rest of the fortress. She couldn't wait. Sometimes it was better when things were less complicated. Remember the plan, she told her officers. No need to make things fancy. Box formation, 3 deep. Mage batteries to call their own targets. Rotate on my command and keep the lines tight. Make sure the centurions are keeping a close eye on their people. It's easy to draw too deep when the fighting is intense. If we lose anyone to overload, I'm holding you responsible. She glared at them, but they held her gaze and nodded, determined not to let their comrades down. She'd been worried when they'd foisted such young officers onto her, particularly Joshin and Morelia as tribunes, but so far they had proven to be promising steel, just as she'd been told. Now it was time to put them in the fire and see their real qualities. She turned her gaze back over the disciplined ranks of her legion. It was impossible for her heart not to swell with pride at the sight. The greatest honor of her life was to command men and women like these. She raised her voice once more. WHO are you? She roared. The Legionem Abbaci. The enemy is before you. Kill, kill, kill. No mercy for monsters. Kill, kill, kill. WHO are you? The strongest under the earth. Show me. Chiron drew her blade and held it high as she turned and marched at the head of the column. Every moment, the sound of fighting drew louder, the stench of mucus and sizzling flesh stronger and stronger. Behind her, troops organized themselves with each step, shifting into formation, organizing their ranks. Centurions moved swiftly amongst the troops, hunting for any flaw in their movement, but none was found. With her left arm, the commander hefted her shield, while in her right she gripped her demon blade tight. The Incus pattern armor sat heavily on her shoulders, but with the mana burning through her body flowing into the metal, it was a part of her, and she accepted it. As soon as she was in range, Chiron leveled out her blade, drew in a sharp breath, then lunged into a furious, flawless stabbing motion. She was still 100 meters short of the conflict, her blade didn't come anywhere near touching a monster, but it didn't have to. From the tip of her weapon, a beam of light surged, spearing through the darkness like judgment. The light clashed into a crab-like beast and pierced straight through it, breaking apart the shell like it wasn't there. "Kill," she roared. "Kill, kill, kill," her soldiers replied. Chapter 14:19. Unbreakable Abyssal Steel. For what reason does the Abyssal Legion have such a fearsome reputation? Why is it that anywhere on Pangara, on the surface or in the dungeon, people know the name, Legionum Abyssi? The Legion are not a national army. They do not owe allegiance to any king, court or parliament, but instead operate as an independent force that is somehow allowed to maintain recruitment, training, keeps and castles in over half the lands in this world. The Legion does not trade. The secrets of their order are not for sale, no matter the price. The only way to claim a suit of Legion armor is to pry it from a dead legionary, and if someone does, the Legion are sure to find them and ask for it back. Firmly funded largely through donations or tithes from grateful kingdoms, they have held firm against the monsters during and ever since the rending itself. If one were to try and calculate the lives saved due to the Abyssal Legion over the last 2,000 years, I am certain that number would be equal to that of all the living beings on Pangara today. Excerpt from Legionum Abyssi, an examination, by Kint. "Shields up, hold the line," Chiron roared. After pushing their way through the existing defenders for the past 5 minutes, the Legion had finally reached the front ranks, giving time and space for the ants and their allies to withdraw behind them. Shoulder to shoulder, the legionaries formed a wall, their shields wide and tall, locked together to present a unified front. For the initial engagement, Chiron anchored the line herself. Front and center of the formation, she sucked the mana deep into her body, letting it rage through her flesh and infuse her muscles and armor. "Lance," came the call, and as one, the soldiers slipped their shields to the side, opening a gap and launching a devastating thrust through the breach. A storm of sword light exploded forth, 2 ranks of legionaries concentrating the force of their blades outwards in devastating thrusts. The light carved holes through the monsters and encroaching waves of mucus, but the legionaries did not press their advantage. Instead, they locked their shields together once more, activating their defensive skills to produce a wall of force that held strong before them. On 3 sides of the platform, the Legion formed an indomitable armored wall 3 ranks deep. No matter how the monsters of the Fifth threw themselves forward, regardless of their heedless charges or streams of slime and mucus, the wall did not break. "Lance," came the call once more. Chiron gritted her teeth and summoned the force from deep within her aging body. Mana ignited within her flesh, empowering her muscles, strengthening her arm. The abyssal armor took that strength and enhanced it further, transmitting it to her blade as she moved with flawless technique, every joint rotating in sync as her blade skill activated. Along with the soldiers on her left and right, the commander shifted her shield to the side and thrust her sword through the narrow gap. It was a small opening, but through it she saw the horrors of the Fifth bearing down on her position. Only, a moment later, those monsters were obscured from her vision as light exploded once more from the tip of her blade. The swordsmanship of the Legion was like everything else they did, simple, brutal and effective. Not for them was the elegant manipulation and control of the folk blade masters. Overwhelming force, unstoppable penetration, undeniable results. That was the style of the Legion, and Chiron was a master. The air trembled around her, and Chiron knew instantly what had caused it. The mage batteries were ready. Dense balls of deep red fire arched overhead, so intensely hot the soldiers could feel the searing heat of them despite the distance. As they reached just beyond the peak of the arc and began to curve down, the fireballs split into 1,000 smaller shards of flame and accelerated, stabbing down into the monsters like a rain of death. Each one pierced and burned, driving deep into the filth and igniting many of the monsters they touched, but even that wasn't enough. The corruption of the Fifth was so strong that even the greatest magic wasn't able to last long within its influence. Slime snuffed the flames, and even the most potent offensive magic eventually broke apart. No matter, the Legion would endure. Heave, came the call, repeated by centurions up and down the line. As one, the line dug in their heels, pushed their shoulder to the back of their shields, and pushed. An explosive wall of force burst forth, strong enough to shatter stone. Everything within a dozen meters was forced back. Nothing could resist or stand its ground in the face of that overwhelming strength. Attack. Once more, Chiron summoned the sum total of her strength. Her body hummed with power, all of it was drawn out and poured into the heavy Incas pattern armor before extending down her sword arm. She executed a devastating slash, sending a wave of light slicing through the filth before her. Then another, and another. Each strike flowed into the next, her movements perfectly controlled. The channels carved through her body by the baptism lit up like fire as mana thundered through her body. Chiron bared her teeth in a rictus grin behind her helmet. She knew this pain was being felt by every man and woman in the line, by every mage channeling more mana through themselves than any human mage had the capacity to do. This pain was what it meant to be in the Legion. This was what it meant to sacrifice yourself to protect a world against monsters. Sword light continued to flow out from the platform in a ceaseless sequence of slashes, until finally. Shields. BGSSP 10448 margin left. Auto, margin right. Auto, display. Flex, justify content. Center, BG container 10448 F61E68 display. Flex, flex direction. Column, align items. Center, justify content. Center, Z index, 2,147,483,647. Important, BG container 10,448,222 EB6 display. Flex, flex direction. Column, align items. Center, justify content. Center, Z index, 2,147,483,647. Important. With a sound like a colossal iron gate slamming shut, the soldiers locked shields again, reforming the wall. In moments, the monsters and slime crashed into the barrier, pressing, slamming, chewing and screaming as they tried to break through. But they wouldn't. With abundant mana flowing through her, Chiron knew she could keep this up all day. For a week. WHO or we? She bellowed. The strongest under the earth. Her legion roared back. Chapter 1420. Watching and learning. I know the strength of the colony, I know everything we can do individually, or as a well-trained and disciplined army. If I am also aware of what the enemy is capable of, then what do I have to fear? A single battle, a dozen, 100 or 1,000, the outcome of all can be calculated and predicted. Knowledge and preparation are what win wars. That has always been my belief, and every experience has only reinforced it. Excerpt from Words of Solent, Colony General, by Historiant. Peaceful and calm, Solent watched the unending rage of the Fifth continue to boil and froth all around the platform. Reports from the front were one thing, but witnessing the never-ending torrent of mucus and slime for herself was certainly an experience. Even more disturbing were the monsters who moved within and amongst the stuff, churning and oozing their way through the muck to attack the platform and hurl themselves into the cleansed mana. She stood in the middle of the reserve militia, observing the battle unfold with her keen eyes, seeing the actions of the Legion through her 1,000 lenses, each one focused on a different aspect of the fighting. What do you think, General? Her sibling, Leonidant asked. These Legion people seem to think a lot of themselves, I wonder if they deserve their reputation. We don't underestimate our enemies, Solent stated evenly. We don't overestimate them either, Leonidant countered. If they aren't dangerous, then I refuse to treat them as such. Appropriate force for appropriate demand, that's your philosophy. Our philosophy, Solent reprimanded, and yes, I would say they are worthy of their reputation. Their infantry are holding much better than I was led to expect, given the accounts I read of the siege in the second stratum. The Legion defeated us in that siege, did they not? Leonidant asked, confused. Of course they did. We were saved only by the wave breaking when it did. Yet, there were numerous direct clashes between the colony and the Legion, and I have studied all of the accounts of those interactions. Despite an overwhelming advantage in numbers, we were pushed back almost every time. However, if the ants of those battles were to face the legionaries in front of us, I believe they would be soundly defeated. They're that much stronger, Leonidant asked doubtfully. What's the difference between the soldiers then and now? The scout looked out towards the lines of the Legion, holding firm against the tide of monsters and sludge. It was impressive they could hold, but that wasn't the main challenge of fighting against the wave. No, being able to push back the tide once or twice wasn't the point, not at all. 100 times. 1,000, not for minutes, but for hours, days and weeks on end. That was the challenge of facing the wave in the Fifth. She would reserve judgment until the real grind had set in, but it seems Solent had already come to a decision. They are well drilled, experienced, and with clear lines of leadership. They respond actively to changes in conditions on the battlefield with flexible tactics and disciplined movement. All the qualities I look for in a well-led army, they possess. It was hard to push back against that statement. They were disciplined, that much was obvious. The shield wall was well formed, the individual soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder, braced and ready to act. Let's turn our attention to their equipment, Solent went on. In particular, their shields and armor. While their shield skills are proving to be effective at keeping the acid and slime at bay, they aren't perfect. I've seen 4 soldiers doused with a significant amount of mucus so far. Has anyone else seen how their armor fared? I haven't seen it, Leonidant stated, focusing back on the lines. How did Solent manage to pick out 4 individuals amongst the thousands fighting out there? What sort of mutations did she have? There doesn't appear to have been any damage at all, Solent said calmly. None of the 4 have removed themselves from the front line, and nobody seems to expect them to. I have no idea how they created such resistant armor. The very best that our smiths can produce isn't nearly as capable of holding up against the acid and corruption of the 5th. If our carapaces could hold as well as that armor, our attrition rates for soldiers would be cut to a third or less. That had been the greatest challenge faced by the colony so far during the wave. The corrupted mana needed to be close enough to the platforms to be collected and funneled into the fortress, which meant letting the monsters get close. Preventing them from disgorging slime, mucus and parasites onto the front lines of the colony had been impossible, even with the numerous tactics the colony had tried to employ, such as extensive use of barrier magic, more mundane shields and armor or hit-and-run formations that gave the soldiers more flexibility. Finally, they are strong. Their skills are highly ranked, their stamina does not seem to be flagging and their offense is potent. What is making them so much stronger than the last time we fought against them? I don't know. However, the evidence of their strength is right in front of us. The Legion are a formidable foe, and I don't believe for one second they are showing all of their cards, Solent stated. There is more they can do, but they don't want us to see, which is understandable. What we will be able to grasp here on the platform is the limits of their endurance. When the days turn to weeks, we will see just how long they can maintain this level of performance. Having said her piece, Solent settled into watch, her unblinking eyes seeing everything, missing nothing. All of the data funneled into her analytical mind, and she began strategizing and planning. After all, one never knew what the future might hold.